Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. I'm Santiago, Kneeland, your host, and today we're going to be talking about prayer. We have a very special guest. He's not a newbie here in the podcast world. His name is Jim Watkins. You probably heard of him if you follow the Urantia radio podcast. He's the host, the producer, and I'm very excited to have him here. He's a very personality that I've been following, and his program has really inspired part of this program. So I'm really happy to have him here, and especially talking about a topic that's really interesting, prayer. I think that prayer sometimes is doesn't get the what it deserves. Let's put it that way. So that one of the things that Jim and I are going to be doing in this program is to unpack what is prayer, how can we pray, and what can prayer do to the individual. So I'm going to introduce Jim, and Jim is he does a lot of stuff, but his career spanning over 2 decades in commercial broadcasting. He discovered the Urantia book at 19, very young age, basically the same age that I did, and has since dedicated his life to studying and sharing its teachings. He has written 3 books, including A New Revelation and The Gift, and launched the Urantia radio podcast with over 35,000 annual subscribers. He currently lives in Florida with his family, continuing his work in spreading the teachings of the Urantia book. So welcome, Jim. It's really an honor to have you here.
Well, it was really great to meet you the first time when we were on a thing that was, what was that? That was like, oh, I know what it was. It was the Jubilee. I think it was the Jubilee, and I met you and some other folks down where you live. Or at that time, I thought you lived in South America, but I realize now that you actually are in Spain. So anyway, it's good to see you again.
Well, it's good to see you now. Now you're in that part, and I'm in this part because it's usually the other way. So I'm excited about this. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about before we dive into our topic, into prayer, was the Urantia radio podcast. I mean, what I like about your show is there's a very good variety of topics. You know, if you're somebody that's reading the Urantia book and want to have, a candid explanation, because sometimes you have explanations, sometimes you have interviews with some very important people. So if you want to have this candid conversation or somebody that, a nice voice that can help you, I think Jim is that. So tell us a little bit about your program and your experience doing this and doing the service of the revelation.
Well, the podcasting thing sort of evolved, or it just came up because I'd always wanted to try to do my career, use radio as a way of, I always thought, man, there's got to be a way to bring the Urantia book to the people via radio. And I just felt it was so advanced that it probably, I would have to buy a lot of time, and then I probably would get kicked off of radio stations because I think people would call and go, what the hell is this nut talking about? And so I was always sort of cautious on how I wanted to approach it. And then podcasting kind of got more improved around 2017, where the tools were better, and you could create a podcast with a pretty decent microphone. And since I had the experience of gathering information and doing a show, it just seemed like a natural fit. And I said, I'll try it for a while. And I didn't do any kind of advertising or anything. And so we're at about, 160,000 people a year, which doesn't seem like a lot, but to me, 10 people, because that means those people heard about the Urantia book and maybe it changed their life, like maybe it changed my life. And that's basically the story. And I do it as a labor of true love. I kind of feel like I don't really do much I don't like to proselytize, and I don't like to preach, but I do like to share. And this book is phenomenal. I mean, it's just unbelievably, it is a revelation. And for the first 10 years, I read it trying to find something to prove it wasn't a revelation. Very skeptical. I loved what it had to say, but there's a difference between loving a book and then believing it's something on the level of a revelation. Once you have a perspective of the universe and of life from a Urantia book perspective, the first impulse is you want to tell everybody. And the second impulse is you want to live what you know. And boy, when you know that you're in this, it's kind of like, this is a metaphor. Let's say you live on an island and you don't know of any other people anywhere. You just think that that island is all there is. That's your world. And then a ship shows up, and it's people that look like you or kind of thinks like you, and they tell you, no, 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 no. You don't have any idea of the world that you live in. Let me tell you about it. And that's what the Urantia book is. It's sharing with us what else is going on in our happy little universe. And it's consistent with most mainline religions. It certainly taps into the divinity of Christ and his mission and what he was here to do. And even though I like the Bible and even though I considered myself a Christian, there were just too many unanswered questions. And the Urantia book systematically answered all of them.
And I want to add to that. I think what you're saying, and it's very important, and especially people that are listening to this podcast, because the divine within also stems from the teachings or the basis from the Urantia book. And what it states, it's really not substituting, like you're saying. We're not proselytizing. We're not pushing an agenda. We're expanding on what there is out there, and this is something that I think better describes it. It's not that we're going to give you another version or give you something different, but I think it's giving you more insight. And that's what's important. What you're just saying, you're bringing more knowledge, and that knowledge gives you more understanding of your world, of how things is. I mean, that's what we do. We look for knowledge to understand and not only how to live. And this is what this book does. It tells you, gives you insights on other stuff, not beyond the material, beyond the mundane, into who we are and what we're here to do. So I think it's a very good, and the way that you do it, and that's why I think I like your show, is it's not pushing that agenda.
Commiserating on the fact that this book,
Yes.
it's aids you in kind of grasping the importance of not only the message, which is that we live in a very heavily populated universe, which it is in itself a revelation. I mean, we're still asking, is there life out there? We send out probes and people still don't know. I feel like I know the answer because of the presentation in the Urantia book. Now, somebody could say, well, yeah, but anybody could make that up. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings, look at Star Wars. Those are in imagination. But I say, yeah, but the difference is this. This book doesn't say it's fiction. It says it's nonfiction. I mean, they very specifically say, we've been able to give this to you. And frankly, the last time they sent somebody, we put them up on the cross. So you have to think about it.
Exactly. Why it's done this way. And like you were saying, it's very important. There's a moment, and you were saying about that you love a book, and then you understand what this book represents. And I think that anybody that reads and is a Urantia book student gets to that point. We all come skeptical. We all come and look and with an attitude of let's see what this says, and you start reading it, and it gets to a point where you realize this is something beyond just a material book. I think everybody has that, and it's different things for different people, but anybody that's a UB reader tells you that. I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's not something you really have to you can give people a little bit of information, but if you give them too much, that's not good. You can't overteach the book. At the end of the day, you just have to hand somebody the book and say, well, just start from the Jesus Papers if they're a Christian. Or if you're a historian, start from part 3, because you'll learn, it'll fascinate you, and then you'll go, well, if you're really into philosophy, read paper 100, The Reality of Religious Experience, and learn about philosophy and learn about how our religions evolved over the years. A lot of people say, oh, God is just an invention because people are afraid of death. Well, actually, that there's a sense of truth to that, because fear of ghosts led to religion and became transactional, good and evil. How do I ward off evil spirits? How do I negotiate with the gods? And yes, they were evolutionary, but what does the book say? Evolution is accentuated by revelation.
And look at the current situation of the world. I think you think that by this time we would have solved the war issue, and I think it's getting worse. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? Because when we last spoke, Iran had not. And do you talk to any Christian friends? They'll tell you, well, this is supposed to happen this way. This is the end of the world.
Exactly. And that's interesting, the sequence of events. So that's maybe another topic that we can address, because it's very intriguing. And the things that are coming out every day makes it more relevant. But today, I think we have one very special topic that we discussed, and that I think what the insights that the Urantia book brings, and what we both have had in personal experience is very, it's something that we can talk about. It's on prayers. One of the first things that I want to talk about is the transformative effect of prayer. A lot of people, let me just mention this, that I saw, from an influencer that's more in the natural and like, in the Gaia, and not that she doesn't believe in God, but she doesn't pray. She would usually meditate. And then suddenly she made a post and saying that she started to pray, and praying to a person, to a personality, and asking for something,
Yeah.
and the transformation that had. And that before she wouldn't pray, it was more like, oh no, we're all part of, which we're all part of this energy, and maybe we don't need to pray. But I want to hear on your take on what a prayer can do and its transformative effect.
Well, we all know what white blood cells do. They proliferate and they kind of go off on their own, and they become destructive to the body. And this is what Lucifer's rebellion was all about. He became destructive. You notice it's interesting that I'll get back to the prayer aspect and the Father, but if you think about what happened when the rebellion happened, they cut off, they quarantined the 38 or so planets that joined in the rebellion. Okay, that's a high concept, I know, but that in essence is like a cancerous cell in a body. And what happens when you get a virus on your computer and you want to keep it from spreading? You quarantine it from other computers. You shut it off so that it can't infect the network. So from that perspective, we are all part of the supreme, which is the evolutionary aspect of deity, the experiential experiment that God is doing. He wants us all to participate in the growth of the universe. So prayer is more or less just staying in contact with that source. And we do it because God is a personality, as we are personalities. So on that higher level of personality connection, prayer is the mechanism that allows you to communicate with God. Now, I will add this. I was shocked to find out that, did you know that when you're in prayer or deep meditation, that your pineal gland actually excretes a substance in your brain? Did you know that?
No,
And that
I
came
did.
from a Urantia book reader. I think her
I
name is Jenny
didn't.
Martin. Yeah.
I
There's
did know
actually,
that there's something that goes in the brain, but not exactly this. But this is logical, that there's something that
if you go
secretes.
back, it's one of the earlier episodes. I was shocked, and the only reason I ran across the article, I forget who turned me onto it. It might have been Joshua Wilson or something. It's like, that's a physical mechanism. The Urantia book says that the thought adjuster, the spirit of God, the fragment, lies in the citadel of your mind. It's deep within the citadel, and it emerged when Andon and Fanta, for the first time, worshipped. The actual act of worshiping created the mechanism by which we could communicate. It's kind of like when you turn your Bluetooth on.
Yeah, there's the connection maybe, and it's very interesting. And I like that you made the Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi, or even the radio signals. It's very interesting when I was a kid to kind of comprehend where that signal was emitting and how it was just being received by your radio, and then you start there's airwaves, and it's the same thing, and how can you prove radio waves if you can't see them? Then how can you prove this connection, this prayer, and this dialogue that you're having with God? Because it's also invisible.
And he's responsive. That's the amazing thing, is in the greatness of his all-ofness, he's responsive to every single prayer or act of worship. He wants that connection. And I say he because he's described as the Father. The Father is the highest human concept. And so they use that. I know a lot of people say, oh, the Great Mother. Look, I'm not going to debate the gender identity of God, but that would be
Yeah,
a
that's
fool's
another
errand.
Yeah,
Let's just say it's beyond sex, okay? Maybe
exactly.
it's just beyond sex. But
Yeah.
there is a mother spirit, which is the infinite spirit, which sponsors the seraphim who cater to us and aid us and give us comfort and give us guidance. There is that motherly aspect of the universe as it is expressed in the conjoint actor, the mother spirit.
Which, and let me make this parenthesis, and good that you bring it. Yeah, there is a sort of, maybe not in the sex, as like you're saying, in the male female way that we see it, but there is a male female
sure,
aspect
even in
to
seraphim.
the universe. Yeah, exactly.
That's correct.
There is this part, but we're talking about the first source and center, the one that where everything stems out, the controller, the upholder. It's like where everything revolves around. So how do we connect? And this is interesting because I mean the concept of us as mortals, we're the farthest away, the personalities that are the farthest away from, and spiritually, the spirits are the farthest away from the first social center. But at the same time, we have the that fragment of God, that divine within us, where we can communicate. So I want to hear your take on this, on how we can communicate with God. How can we pray? That's a big question.
Yeah. Well, it's a natural, each of us has the natural ability to pray, just as we have the natural ability to want to feel safe or feel loved. You don't have to teach somebody how to love somebody, but you want to be in a right environment with music or nature. I mean, the Urantia book and other books will tell you that when you want to get into that mood, there is a difference, I think, and I'm not an expert at this, but, there are people who meditate, they do yoga. And I think in many of the people that do that, it's not a personal experience in the action of you reaching out to another person. It's more of a meditative state of mind that calms the anxiety of the day, which is great. It serves a purpose. But imagine if you could kick it up a notch and you took it from meditation to prayer, and then you took it from prayer to worship, because prayer is talking back and forth. Worship is for its own sake. You're just giving homage to the Creator. You're just appreciating the nature of God and
There's
the
not
existence of God.
there's not that communication. You're just worshiping. What I hear worship is when you fall in awe, and I've had those moments where, especially when everything clicks, I think we all have those in life when you're struggling and suddenly boom, everything clicks, and you just fall in awe. That's worship, right?
Yeah, that has a real calming effect. So, but it's important that, and the reason that prayer, and I wanted to talk about it is today, is because I have a lot of, let's just say I have a lot of experience with people who suffer greatly from all kinds of mental illness. And the common denominator that I have seen over and over again is that many people who suffer from anxiety or mental illness, they also lack a clear belief in spiritual faith, or they've been taught that religion is not something that's for them. And to me, when you think of all the money and all the resources we put into treating people with mental illness with drugs that basically mask the symptom of the pain that you might be feeling, whether it's anxiety, whether depression, whatever it is, right? We put a pill in somebody's hand and you say, take it, you'll feel better. But study after study shows that people who have faith, strong faith, suffer the least from mental illness. It doesn't mean that they don't have mental illness, especially if it's neurological or if it's nutritional. There's a lot of ways you can make your body sick. And the Urantia book talks to this. It says if you have clean habits, you eat well because your body is a system that we've created for you. So give it optimum nutrition and it'll serve you well. It'll give you a great immune system. And if in good habits, thinking habits is also important too.
Thinking habits as well. Very important.
And you have to, when you start to feel down, you have to be able to touch something that will get you back up. And prayer does that. Prayer will give you that ability to re-energize your spiritual battery that sustains you as you're dealing with all the complicated currents of life.
Yeah, it's not that it's going to solve the issues, and sometimes you wish or you pray it would, but it gives you that, that energy.
Like a vitamin.
In Spanish we say templanza. I don't know the exact translation, but templanza means that sturdiness. It gives you that steadfastness. I think is the word. Resilience.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I read a quote the other day that said the spirit fragment's job is not to make your life easy.
I saw that. It's to make it complicated enough for you to foster the thought, and yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and many people will pray when life is at its extreme, some tragedy. Yeah. I was watching some guy that I follow on Instagram, and he said he lost his dog today, and he was very depressed because the dog had been in his life for 14 years. And he said, the one thing I want to know is, do the dogs go to heaven? That would make me feel better, But, prayer should not be always about what you want. It should also be about what's the right choice.
Yeah.
And also I would say this, one of the things that I admired, probably the characteristic that I admired most about Jesus as a human, is that he had no problem with living with God every single day. He was almost like in a constant state of communion. And I think when you adopt this connection, it's not that difficult because it's about the decisions you're making. And if you always ask yourself before making any decision, is this the right decision? Is this the best decision? That actually makes your life a whole lot easier, because if you're constantly trying to do the right thing, it's only when you are doing all the wrong things that problems happen, right?
Yeah, that you kind of realize where it jumps in your face, right?
And none of us are going to make, my feeling is, if in the course of your life, if 51% of the time you made the right decision, I would call that a victory,
Yeah, exactly. And
because that's we're not
yeah,
we're not perfect,
yeah,
but
and
prayer, I think, is a good call for today, because there's so much consternation going on in the world, and we're awash in materialism. And I just think that for a lot of people, if I could tell them any message, I would say, the power is within you. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and tap into that source, and it will serve you well.
now I wanted to go into the mechanics of prayer, and this is how I do it, and I don't know how you do it, but and I think there is a mechanic to prayer. The first thing I do is of course, I'm in a quiet space, but I reset. Even when I'm in the ocean, that's where I love to pray. When I go into the ocean or the sea, because I'm in the Mediterranean, so there's not an ocean. But I go in there and then I lie on the water, and there I pray, because I think that's where the balance of the universe is. I always seen the water and the waves as the breath of the universe. So that's where I see the energy exchanging.
Yeah.
But I start with the Lord's Prayer, and I think I've adapted the Lord's Prayer to my own. I've added stuff, I've modified stuff, I'm kind of personalized that, and that's like an invocation. I start with that. That's what gets me into that that mindset. And
Yeah.
then I start with and that continue with giving thanks for everything, specifically for something specific at that time. Then I ask for specific things that are beyond my reach, beyond my hands. And then I ask for, how can I change? What are the things that I need to change? What are the lessons that I need? And I ask specifically, there's something conflicting me, if there's a decision, if there's something that's beyond, that I need. So it takes me to those phases. I don't know if that happens to you, but I think you have to give it it's not just saying, oh, I want to have this.
Well, everybody has a way of getting to that space, and that's the commonality, is that you kind of eliminate the outside noise so you can have a private, personal conversation with your Father. But on the other hand, I prayed from rooftops overlooking Los Angeles. I prayed on airplanes before they take off. There's all, I'm not going to let the fact that I can't get to a quiet space prevent me from having a word.
Yeah, exactly. No, you have that conversation, but there's like quiet conversation, noisy conversation. But I think that's the important thing. And you were saying about Jesus, that constant communion. And I like the word communion, not in the traditional way, but it's this well, it is the traditional way. It's this communion that you're communing with God.
It is. It's keeping the lines open, really. And I'm reading here that just a quote that references the fact that also the Son of God, is involved in this process too, because the Son, it actually goes to him first, but since he and
Okay.
God are one, that eventually will. But I wish I could find it. It's a good quote. You worship God, pray to and commune with the Son, and work out the details of your earthly sojourn. Let's see what it says here. Kind of dot dot dot. And you work out the conditions of your life. I wish I could find it, but my eyes they failed me again.
Oh, but that's good. That's the process of how it goes.
Well, it's a physical thing that's actually occurring, and that's what I like about the quote, is that you are sending a message, and the message is received. And I think the UB, and certainly the Bible and other books, will always affirm the fact that prayer is a bona fide way of communicating on a spiritual level. And we are challenged by that, because we're not true spiritual beings. We are mortal. We are human. What does it say about the poisons of the spirit? Jealousy, fear, envy. Fear is probably our worst enemy. It is the one that it tricks the mind into thinking the worst possible outcomes. And fear is what drives, why do we have insurance? Because we fear that we're going to get sick, right? Although it's a good thing sometimes, but it's not
Yeah.
overpriced. Why do we have car insurance? Because it's not because we think we're going to get into an accident. It's because we fear we might get into an accident. And so in the same way, fear also prevents us from reaching God, because we might be wrong. Maybe he doesn't exist. Maybe I'm wasting my time. And after 300 years of secularism, it's easy to understand why people don't pray. I feel that our earth will get better if more people are just given the permission to petition God. You have the right to petition your Father. And in that statement, you're restoring the dignity of the human being. And that's what Jesus did. He
Okay.
restored the dignity of human being by telling us you're not only just children of a materialistic universe, you're also a child. You're a living child of the extension of deity. He made you in his image so that you would be able to communicate with him.
What you're saying is very, very interesting about the dignity. That's something that, and we were conversing the other day in the Spanish podcast that we were talking about burnout, and one of the important things that the concepts of why burnout happens is that you lose your dignity, and this is what secularism in the material world has done to the individual. You get into this rut, working, and then you're just a number, and you lose that dignity. And when you do that, when you just become a number and not an individual, that's where you lose your personality, and you
Well,
just
think about the people of Los Angeles or anywhere. Think of what's the capital of Spain? Madrid.
Madrid.
Yeah, it's a sprawling metropolitan, and every day people get in their cars for 3 hours just sitting there, and all you see is a line of cars. It's hard not to feel undignified, or without
Yeah,
dignity.
exactly.
You're just sitting there. You're like a cattle.
It's a system, and the system breaks you, and I think
Yeah,
that's
you're
very
right.
important. It's very important in our days to not fall into that system, and prayer is one of those things to keep yourself out of that system and give yourself that worth, I believe.
Yeah,
That
it's an
dignity.
antidote to moral despair. That's what it is. Prayer is an antidote to moral. And again, going back to what we said before, if it's true that in our pineal gland, which lies at the very center of our brain, if it actually does release some sort of a chemical agent that calms the mind, reduces anxiety, increases blood flow, whatever that mechanism is, it was designed to do that. It was put into us. And it was that first act. That's why it's so significant about what Andon and Fanta were, because the world was filled with well, they were the first two to pray, and they were more advanced than their father and mother, but it was that mental ability to pray and seek for guidance. And then they went north because they were directed to move north away from their hairy cousins.
Well, that's basically what really initiated the human species, that the ability to pray, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they made a
That's
big
what
deal about it
separated.
too.
Yeah.
Remember after that, like the next day at noon, we're told that there was a big celebration, and they made the announcement, and they sent the news to, I guess it was the Most High of Adentia, and they sent a congratulations on Urantia 606. We finally produced two human beings that are capable of worshiping deity. That was such a major event for them. And then, of course, the life carriers, they stood back. After that moment, they said, well, now we can't interfere with the process anymore.
Yeah, they did their work. They did their work, and now if this is what you're hearing sounds crazy, it might sound, but it's a part of the lost history that you can find about, or you can read about, or you can listen to Jim's podcast about, because he talks a lot about this, or you can read the book on. I mean, these sections are very interesting on prayer. Exactly. I don't know. It's part 3. I don't know exactly, and we do have the Urantia pod as well. So maybe if you don't want to read it, we do have the Rancho part where we have people discussing this, and you can hear more details. So check it out. You're gonna also, if you look at our link tree, you're gonna find the Rancho part and the Rancho tutor that can help you with that. So anything that you don't understand from what Jim and I are saying, you can find the answers. I mean, that's the point. So coming back to what we were saying, yes, a prayer I think was fundamental. So I mean, if it was such an important tool, why? I mean, we need to use it. That's where I get the necessity in our day, mostly, that we need to use it, because if not, we're going to get lost. And you see a lot of despair in people because of that.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you are a particular religion either. I mean, most religions have some allowance or encouragement of seeking that divine connection, whatever that divine connection means to you. So
that's one topic that I wanted to comment also, now that we're engaged in this, is the difference between group worship and prayer. I think that one thing is group worship and we all come together, and prayer becomes something very personal.
I don't know if I should share this story, But the woman I was dating when I was about 22, she was a real Baptist, and they were into speaking in tongues and, stuff that I just didn't get with. But even in that environment, when we were all worshiping together, it still felt good.
Okay.
Even though I didn't agree with a lot of what was going on and the little groups that you would get into, there was still a good feeling of camaraderie. And I have to admit, because I had already been reading the Urantia book for 3 years, I pretty much sealed my opinion of what speaking in tongues was all about, which is, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that there was a sense of communion. And when I've gone to Urantia book group sessions, study groups, some have prayer before they start, others do not. It never feels bad, but I don't feel like I have to have group worship in order to have that connection with God. And I'm not, and admittedly, I'm not a real big churchgoer, because I know that I'm the kind of person that would like to raise my hand and ask a question. And they don't like that,
I got into that same situation, and I think that it's good. And I think we commented this the other day that one thing, it's the personal connection, that the divine within, that personal relationship with God, that's very personal, and that's the thing with prayer. And I think worship is when you share that joy, and it's not sharing to convince somebody or to sell to somebody, but it's share to and sharing is very, there's no agenda, there's no hidden agenda. That's the thing, that's why it's a gift. Why a community and a group worship, when there's nothing that you're selling or you're taking, it becomes sharing. So I think that's very good. But
Yeah.
I agree with you, it doesn't substitute the individual and the personal.
Yeah, it's like the
element.
difference between, think about it in terms of family. Always think about things in terms of family. There are times where you want to just have time alone with dad. And it's great that everybody gets together and celebrates family together, the family of believers or even non-believers. I think if we designated a day of prayer where everybody on that particular day prays for peace, maybe peace would come. Maybe somehow, just in our collective desire to find peace, if it truly is a collective desire to find peace, maybe then that would enable God to fill our hearts, and we would all seek harder to find peace.
That's the transformative effect that prayer has, and that's one of the characteristics of prayer. So imagine if we all, like you're saying, maybe not only a day but a habit of prayer. Like you're saying, there's a gland, it's something physical that happens to you. So if you stimulate this, and we get into this
Spiritual
positive
habits
feedback,
is what they call
yeah,
it.
and it's a positive loop, a positive feedback
Yeah.
loop. What
They
happens,
say in Islam, they pray 5 times a day. 5 times a day in Islam, they pray. And I say, why stop at 5? Why not 50? Why
Yeah.
you cut yourself short? You only call your mother 5 times a year? 5 times? You know what I'm saying. In other words,
No,
what's
and
with the limit? What's
well,
with the quota?
that's the communion that we were talking about, that Jesus had, or the prayer that he had. And it wasn't the prayer in that structure that I mentioned, but it's the communion. The communion is that where you feel them next to you, and you have like a one-on-one conversation. It's weird, and I know what it, and I think we mentioned this before. In Spanish, the word for Jesus is Chuy, and when I was younger
Chewy.
and in my 20s, I would say, hey, Chewy, and I would treat
Yeah.
him like
Right. Hey,
my age,
nice.
and he
I
was
think he likes
pushing me.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was my buddy, and and I see him as that, even though he's our father, he also was our brother, our older brother when he came
Yeah.
to the world.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
we
the
have an
quality
extra
that.
kinship because he chose our little world to live out life. So he'll know what it was like to have 5 toes and fingernail problems and, hair and follicles and, all that. So he'll have a lot of commonality with us, and that'll never be taken away from us. We'll always have the
Exactly.
unique Urantia experience. So that's kind of a cool aspect of it. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
tell
I
you,
agree.
it's a tough world. It's not a veil of tears, but it is a tough world, and you've got to have some resilience. Otherwise, listen, to all my friends and people who know, we could eliminate much of mental illness and fear and apprehension if we would start teaching not so much passage and verse, but principle and idea of having that relationship with the divine within. You know,
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
start
totally,
there, that's where you start, and have
totally,
the faith of
totally.
knowing that it's true. If you can and I say this to people who may not think much about it, but try it for a week. Just try praying once a day. You don't have to cite certain words, just whatever comes into your mind and
It's a
put it
dialogue.
out
It's
there.
it's
Yeah,
it's it's a dialogue,
it'll change your life. Yeah.
and I know that some of us maybe don't have a good relationship with our parents, or maybe are fixing that relationship, or with anybody that we love. And maybe you don't have that conversation or that intimacy, but as we've been presenting in this program, you have to build a relationship. You have to start talking. And once you start talking and you start building that relationship, but first you have to say hello. God is always out there. It's us that need to knock on the door, and it will
I was
open.
going to say, yeah, you got to be willing to knock on the door first. And then there's also the aspect of, you don't want to become a spiritual fanatic either. And sometimes you got to be careful not always to be running away and seeking shelter from the storm. You're also encouraged to act. So you can make your supplication, you can put it out there, what you think is you want from God, but then you've got to do something too. You also have to have action. And sometimes I tell people, if you would just do something for somebody else, you would be less depressed, because when you are doing something for somebody else, you are not thinking about yourself. And then after you've had that experience, you're not sitting there feeling sorry for yourself. You're sitting there feeling good because you did something for somebody else.
I, I,
So those
I
are
I
just,
like this action, and it's very important that you take action. It's not only that you pray, and this is something that I learned from Jordan Peterson and his books and his lectures, and something that I applied. And he always said, hey, you've got to have faith, and you've got to have, put everything on that faith, but you have to work for it. It's not that it's just going to happen. You have to do the work and do the what it takes to get to that, and have that faith.
faith in action. That's what I say.
Faith in
So
action, exactly. Well, I think this is basically our time, Jim. It was really a pleasure to have you here to have a conversation on this topic, which is very important, and really help our viewers understand that they can pray. It's very simple. It's a conversation. There's a divine spark within us that, there's a connection. You just need to light it, and that's going to show you the way.
and also I think now is because of what's going on, and we see it would be a good time. We could sure use the prayers of our fellow humans for the people who need it the most. And right now, there's way too much bloodshed, way too much horror in children's hearts. And, maybe we have to go through this. I don't know what the answer is, but we're at a pivot point in human history. And it's ours to lose. And this is the time to lean heavily our unseen friends and the Father. And I think we'll come out of it okay. Jesus put a lot of trust in us.
Yeah.
He really did. We're a really backward planet, had a very scarred history, but he made it through, I guess. And he tried to teach us that it'll be okay. So I'm willing to trust in that.
And that's having faith, and that's putting your trust in Jesus and God, and yeah, I think and praying, and eventually things will work out. And one thing that's very important is to have this brotherhood, to serve each other, and to have this communion with each other as well. That's the part of understanding the fatherhood of God is understanding brotherhood of men. Once we understand
Yeah,
it
and you
and we
can't
see
have one
ourselves,
without the other, right? And that's
exactly.
what I think what's missing today. Maybe that's why we're having the problems we're having. If you think about it, maybe if we were more spiritual on our approach. I mean, even the Urantia book says war has become obsolete. We've got to find new ways to resolve our differences. Otherwise, we're going to end up annihilating each other, just like the green and the orange of the Sangiks annihilated each other. So, I mean, we've got to think about our kids' futures, and it's not easily solved. But I believe if we put a little bit more spirit in it, I think we'll be all right. I hope we'll be all right.
Yeah,
Right?
I think we will.
Okay.
I think we will. Well,
All right. Well,
thanks
anyway,
a
good
lot.
luck with your thing, and I'm so honored. I will tell everybody that this is the first interview that somebody's actually interviewed me. So I feel
Yes,
really
I'm
special.
honored. I'm honored. So
Well,
thanks a lot, Jim. And thanks to everybody for watching us. Thank you for giving us a little time. And if you liked it, I never say that you have to do this. Only if you liked it, please subscribe, share, put a reminder, and we'll see you next time. I'm Santiago Kneeland. This is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. Carpe diem, seize the day.